Hello and welcome. My name is Emily Prieto, and I'm the co-host of the Seeds of Tao podcast alongside my husband, Joshua Prieto. We're also the co-owners of the Seeds of Tao education platform and incubator for regenerative entrepreneurs. If you're new to the podcast, this is a podcast for impact entrepreneurs creating regenerative enterprises. We often get asked what exactly a regenerative enterprise or impact entrepreneur is. So if you're wondering, a regenerative enterprise builds triple bottom line profits through the practice of ethics and principles that lead to a more inclusive, fair, and balanced economy. Impact entrepreneurs, or regenpreneurs, as we sometimes like to call them, are those willing and able to take on the financial and personal risks of starting and building regenerative enterprises. You'll get to know exactly what all that means as you join us for this and future episodes, but know that we welcome everyone to join us as we work to build regenerative economies together. That's exactly why we are here doing what we do at Seeds of Tao. Our mission is to help establish regenerative economies in every bioregion by serving individual regenpreneurs like yourself. In this podcast, you'll hear the startup stories in all their glory from impact entrepreneurs all over the globe. You'll learn and grow the skills of building a regenerative enterprise from your peers, mentors, and leaders. Finally, we'll get to know each other as you engage in the podcast and join the wonderful Regenerative Business Economies Network, aka RegenBen, an open community where peers, colleagues, funders, allies, and supporters of regenpreneurs come together to build the regenerative economies of the future. Join us every month for a wonderful episode as we collectively move beyond sustainability and into our regenerative future. It all starts now.
Hello, welcome. We are on the Seeds of Tao podcast. My name is Joshua Prieto, and I'm going to be your host and guide for this episode today. We're going to be talking about something that's, I don't know if it's controversial, but I have gotten a lot of conversation within the regenerative movement that suggests that when we say the word scale, it can be a little triggering for those in the regenerative movement. And we start saying things like grow our business and those types of things also start to sound against the narrative of what I think is really where this is coming from is when we talk about the degrowth movement. And it's something that I've been wanting to talk about for some time is what is the correlation between regenerative businesses and degrowth. The topic that we're going to be sharing and speaking about, hopefully we can have a conversation about in the community, is scaling our impact in this age of degrowth, right? There are so many people out there that really don't understand this concept, but I think what we're talking about here, our audience understands what we mean when we're talking about degrowth. We're trying to look at different economic models and look at the current economic model that we have and say, well, that's just not working, because if we look at always expanding our economic growth, we're going to run into challenges, or that we're already running into challenges of extractive and exploitative systems that ruin our biodiversity, produce lots of changes to our climate, issues in the weather systems and patterns, and all sorts of different things happening. And the association with our constant need to grow our economies being a significant factor in that problem, right? And so the concept of the degrowth movement is that economy shouldn't be based upon GDP and other factors that are really just targeting on the growth of consumerism and as an economic model, right? So I know I really probably don't have to explain that. The other side of what I think the conversation needs to be opened up to is what does that mean when we have a regenerative enterprise? Does that mean that we don't grow our regenerative enterprise because it's still on the current economic system? We still have to abide by and work along with the economic system that is functioning in our day and age, right? And we can't necessarily look at the world in black and white and say, okay, well, we just need a new system, so therefore, starting now, we're gonna create this new economic system, and everything else is done. It doesn't really work that way. It's too complex and hairy, right? So the conversation that I would like to have today is just that. We have to, at some degree, look at what scale our regenerative enterprise is going to get to, and to create the impact that we want. And so there's a certain size, and there has to be some type of growth if you're starting out from a baseline. What does that look like? And is it healthy? And is there a possibility even that economic degrowth can look sexy to all those other people out there that really focus in on growth of the economy and growth of GDP and those types of things, which I think there is a balance there, right? We can it's a yes and scenario. Like many things, when it comes to regeneration, we want to create regenerative solutions that, yes, solve the problem of whatever problem is existing in the ecosystem and culture and whatnot, but also and provide the same type of services and life that this current economic system has, right? Capitalism and growing economies has kind of given us things that maybe a lot of us can't let go of, or given us new things that allow us to experience life in I wouldn't say richer ways, but in ways that allow for death rates to reduce, people to be to have food and security in ways that necessarily aren't available to a post-industrial system, right? So I'm not shaming or talking down any particular system. I am having a conversation around this thing called degrowth and our regenerative businesses that we're building. Because on this podcast, that's what we talk about, right? As we talk about regenerative entrepreneurs and their enterprises impact entrepreneurs, right? And their regenerative enterprises. If we put it another way, we're all trying to create some type of impact as an individual entrepreneur. And the collective part of that is building enterprises that are regenerative, that lead to a more inclusive and regenerative economy. So with that, let's talk about this. Like, we have this thing called degrowth. And sometimes when I'm talking on circles online and whatnot, I will bring up something about business, and I'll automatically get a wall with some people that are talking about degrowth. And it's this wall of like, well, it can't be business as usual. I'm not saying that it's business as usual, but I understand there are immediate walls when we say things like business, normal economy function, trying to get a profit, and we also have to look at that and say, well, a enterprise or any regenerative organization has to be at least producing some type of value that's profiting something, right? Even if it's a nonprofit, there's still profit in there, something that's giving out more than it is receiving, but the right types of profit, right? Triple bottom line profits is what we're trying to look for. And what does that mean for a economy that we're trying to grow, to degrow or see reduction in some industries and majorly and the main extractive industries, right? So we have a responsibility I think, for entrepreneurs to scale regenerative impact and growth. And we also have the same responsibility to descale, to degrow extractive and exploitative business. And as consumers, we can choose to move away from those extractive and exploitative services and products. As business owners, we have a responsibility to design our businesses in such a way that creates the greatest regenerative impact while reducing the exploitative and extractive and hopefully eventually eliminating. And I'm not saying we're even close to that, right? Almost every enterprise, every household even is really a part of the extractive and exploitative system because it's ingrained into everything that we're doing. But we're moving towards something that is semblance of like degrowth of what this current economy is based on, and something new, a growth of something new that is regenerative and helping regenerate people, the planet, and future. So that's where I kind of wanted to take this discussion, or start it off at least. How do we go about scaling our impact as a regenerative entrepreneur, and how do we bring and maybe descale the exploitative and extractive practices? Well, I don't think we'll hit on the second, because I think there's a lot of what we know we don't need, and we can talk about that. But it's harder for us to understand how we move ahead towards what we want, right? And so I want to talk about scaling in a podcast episode that's talking also about degrowth, which may seem contrary and contradictory, but let's see if it truly is, because I don't think it is. How do we scale our impact as regenerative entrepreneurs, as impact entrepreneurs? There are really 5 things that I've noticed, and I want your thoughts on this as well, those that are listening, that are really critical to what I see a regenerative enterprise needing to do to really create the type of impact at scale, right? So that we can change some of these things. And I'm not saying that it's the same type of scale that we see in very extractive and exploitative industries where there is no amount of scale. It's just always continuous scaling and growth that they're going for. There is some type of point where there's too much growth in a business, right? And if there's too much growth in a business, what do we do at that point? When a business no longer needs to grow, but maybe needs to linger at a certain stage, or decline, or find itself declining to a point where it no longer exists again, or ebbs and flows with the current natural systems that are surrounding it and that it's engaged in. And that seems probably a little bit more regenerative, right? We got to adapt to the resources available, the community needs, the environmental needs, and how do we do that? And there's, I'm sure, lots of different ways that we can talk about this and lots of different suggestions. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, and please share in the comments on this blog post, or please share in our community what you think. What are some of the ways that we can figure out how to scale our business to the certain size and then place it where it needs to be, or not let it get too big for its britches, right? And one way that I have enjoyed listening, someone thought of this, Eric. Oh, Eric, what's your last name? I'm trying to think of your last name right now. Eric, you will be just Eric for right now. Sorry. But we were having a good conversation on one of our think tanks, I believe it was. And we started talking about the Oh no, it was that's what it was. We were having a good conversation on the regeneration pollination, where just a group of regenerative folks come together to network, right? And during that conversation, there came to be a thought around, well, how do we transition a business at that stage that's kind of grown as big as is best for it, and then move on to something else? And I think this was a really good answer from Eric, who said, well, I think that at that point, there has to be some type of transition of the business model and ownership and so forth to the community that it is impacting, or a breaking up of the company so that the communities that it's operating in and impacting can have ownership and control and ability to drive change in that organization. So it never really gets out of hand, or can pivot based upon the community and environmental needs of that particular area. And I thought that was a really good answer. I'm sure it's not the only answer, and definitely have to be really dynamic in coming up with those types of answers. So that's one way that we can keep ourselves to that level. But what are the ways that we get to the type of growth that we need for regeneration itself to take effect and transition or transplant our current system into a more regenerative system, right? A regenerative economy. And so there has to be some type of scaling of our work. And that's really the focus of what I want to talk about today. There are 5 things that I've noticed, and I'm just going to run through those, and then let's dive deeper into them and really have conversations around these. I know it's just me talking today, but I want you to comment. I want you to speak up, reach out to me. We can have more conversations on this. We can have, if someone's in this field, right, of scaling impact within regenerative businesses or working in this, let's talk about it. And let's also talk about if someone's also in this field of what's too big for the regenerative realm, right? And has some value to add into this conversation. Let's have another podcast on it. Let's have you on the podcast. Let's get more conversation around this. But the 5 things that I've noticed and the patterns that I've noticed when it comes to scaling our growth as impact entrepreneurs or impact entrepreneurs building regenerative enterprises, these are the 5 big things that I've seen. There has to be some type of transformational product or service that brings value to people, and then also, of course, brings value to the planet and future generations. So people where they're at right now, right, it has to be adding value to their lives. It can't just be you stop doing this or let's it really does have to. It can't be a solution that's bringing a less than what they already currently have, I should say, right? It's got to be actually providing the service that they already get and giving them something, giving additional value to people, the planet, and future generations, right? That has to be baked into it, or else it's just not going to be a solution in this current economy. No one's going to be attracted to it. So we have to come up with those types of solutions. And there are those solutions that help us change our mindset, change the way that we look at things so that our economy can have this kind of degrowth from extractive and exploitative systems. So I'm not saying that there's not going to be yes, there's going to have to be sacrifice and whatnot, but it has to be done in such a way that the product or service that you're introducing as a regenerative enterprise is showing how that life can be just as good or better benefiting, right? There was this article that I was reading on LinkedIn the other day about, and I need to pull it back up, but I'm just going to blast it out from my memory. They had taken an indigenous culture, a few people, and brought them as a documentary to like Western civilization really, I think it was probably like in Australia, kind of giving them a view of like the world, right? That they live in, and taking them out of the world that they lived in, which was like very hunter-gatherer, very simplified life, and realizing that there was so much value to the life that they were living compared to our really modern way of viewing, was critical and understanding. So if you can convey that type of message, that is actually really a degrowth agenda, right? Or degrowth narrative, I should say, your product or service would actually be adding more value, right? But that's not the only thing. We can live in this modern world and have modern luxuries as well that are also regenerative solutions, and so we can design for that as well, and everything in between. So taking that into perspective, first thing that we really need is a transformational product or service that brings value, something that is of greater value than what they currently already have in their life, or at least perceived value to the people, planet, and future, right? And we know that it has to be more than just a perceived value to the planet. And so I misspoke there. It has to be more, but for people, really, it's more about perception, right? Value can be perceived in many different ways, but we know what is adding to our planet. We know what is adding to future generations and making their quality of life better or more able to thrive. But for the individual, the client that you're working with, that can be many different things. When we perceive their perception of the value that you're offering. So that's the first thing. The second thing is let's have an authentic story that engages with communities. If we can't build out an authentic story, there's no way to scale our impact, right? It has to be an engaging one, and it has to be directed towards individuals, but individuals that are engaging in their communities. And that's really how we start to begin to scale impact. And we'll talk about more of that after we go through these 5 things. But the third thing is let's also see growth and ability and understanding on how to build our marketing systems and do it without exploiting others, right? Everybody thinks of marketing and you think of sales and you think of the shady marketer or shady salesman. Well, we're really not talking about that in this, but we still need marketing, and we still need marketing systems to be able to scale our impact in our businesses. And so along with that, I think that's a huge piece to be able to scale our impact to the level that it needs to be to help us transition away from extractive and exploitative systems, is to one up our marketing skills to compete with the other businesses that are the other side of this coin, right? The extractive and exploitative pieces that are in this economy, and hopefully we can kind of get rid of that type of business. But we have to actually act in the current economic system, and a big piece of that is being able to market ourselves and market the narrative and create that type of transition in the economy. The second is really, if we're going to be able to create our impact, the marketing systems is a part of it, but building a strong team that can market is also another huge piece of it. And that's something I wanted to talk about, is like, if we're going to scale, we got to really start stepping into these spaces that maybe are not our strong points, and really try to strengthen them and make them a better, more intentional skill set for us as entrepreneurs in this space. I think many of us neglect ourselves and our marketing because we are disenchanted with the current systems out there, the extractive systems that are really being exploitative in the way that they market and sell things, and just kind of trying to get the sell, trying to raise production and raise consumerism and those types of things. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about marketing systems that are helping us scale the work that we're doing to add value to people, planet, and future, right? So that needs to happen, and we need to be good at doing it in order to create the impact that we want. And last, number 5, is being very collaborative on a greater narrative together, right? It's very, very easy for big business, big extractive and exploitative business, I should say, to scale their narrative because they have a lot of resources and focus and stuff around that. Very easy for them to do that. And to do it in shady ways even, right? That we're really not understanding how we're being manipulated and used for their own agenda. And for us as these small regenerative enterprises that are working towards a more decentralized system, we got to figure out a way that we can match that type of marketing and sales effort and narrative building in a very collaborative way. So we there are many of us, there's many small businesses, but we're also very small ourselves. And so we'll talk about that too. So those are the 5 that I want to talk about today. And I'm going to start off from the very beginning of our transformational product and service. Let's unpack this and have a discussion on what that means. Again, I know I'm by myself, and so how do you have a discussion by yourself? But I'm talking to you as the listener. Please share in the comments of wherever you saw this, reach out to me. Let's have an open discussion about how we create transformational products and services in our business to create impact. And so we know that as a regenerative business, we're triple bottom line centric, right? Like we have to build a triple bottom line or quadruple bottom line even of serving the people, serving the environment, serving future generations, while also adding to our current economic situation so that people have jobs, people have the ability to have work that is meaningful and valuable to them and be able to provide for their families. Yes, we want all of that, right? It's a yes and solution that keeps the economic engine running. And so let's figure that out. We don't have to grow, but it is required for growth, right? If our business gets to a point where we just don't want to grow, you still have to have a transformational product and service, right? And you can still provide that transformational product or service to individuals that is impactful, and you can get to a certain point of your business, a certain size, and then from there, stop growing. That's great. So you don't have to grow, but you still have to have that. And yet you still also need it for if you're going to scale your impact and you want to go a little bigger, you want the organization to create more impact, you're gonna have to make sure that you start off with this really nailing down a product that is creating some type of transformation. And it's doing so again with this yes and mentality. Like, yes, we can save the planet. Yes, we can create a more holistic culture. And yes, we can do so that helps us create better instances for future generations, better lives for future generations. And it can also be of really good value to you in this moment right now, to help you in a part of your life, right? These yes and solutions, like, we know if we're going to be able to scale these our enterprises, we have to be able to hit the masses in some point or in some way. And that means that your product or service has to be able to serve someone that's a really late adopter, right? They maybe there's some people that just aren't going to adopt until absolutely they have to, right? And those people, those laggards, whatever you want to call them, or people that just won't accept that current piece, we don't have to really worry about them because the culture will change. They will have to change. Laws will have to be created. And that's where I think laws and things around protecting biodiversity and those types of things, they only work unless the culture is actually changing towards those situations, right? If people are moving away from concrete and petroleum-based products and all these things that are very extractive to natural and forces and environmental forces, then we can see that the culture is changing, and therefore we only really need to change the people that are becoming counterculture, right? The people that are not agreeing to the social contract that this is the way that we want to live in our communities. And so therefore there needs to be laws that people that don't want to live within those rules can't step out of or are penalized for stepping out of those cultural norms, because that's what we agreed upon as a social contract, right? Now I'm getting into like Rousseau's social contract stuff, but I still think it's valuable to this conversation when we're talking about transformational products and services that we're creating. We have to be able to at least hit the majority, right? When you look at market penetration curves, you see early adopters of a certain way, and this works for culture change as well, right? You see early adoption, innovation, and then you see the early majority, late majority. We have to at least be able to get to early and late majority, and that means that we have to speak to people that maybe just don't get it at the level that we are getting it. And so that means that these yes and solutions have to be created. That yes, we are solving for people, planet, and future, and that alone will sell for the early adopters. They will want to purchase the product. They will make the sacrifices up front to benefit people, planet, and future because they believe in it. And they believe in the narrative that is being spoken. But there's going to be people that don't believe in it, or only believe in it to a certain extent, or need a little bit more time with that narrative than it was before. And the way to do that is by making sure that your product or service is creating a yes and solution that is truly transformational, right? For the person that is going to be engaging with it. And that means that it's going to have to be transformational beyond just creating a benefit for the planet or being beneficial for people or society or whatever, right? The individual itself that's purchasing has to receive some type of transformation in it. And there's many ways that we can present that transformation and create that yes and transformational solution. Okay, so I think I've explored that a little bit and kind of how we're talking about this here. But these types of products and services that we're talking about, these yes and transformational solutions, this makes degrowth look very sexy. And I like to use that word because like it makes it so that we can actually make these types of transition, that we can reach some type of tipping point in this, penetration curve of it actually making a difference out in the world, and not just being like, what is it? I don't even know, like 5% of the world is using regenerative agriculture. And I don't even know what type of, how that's even translating into our food systems and fiber systems. And, across the board, it's a very small percentage that regenerative solutions are being brought to the economy. right? And for us to be able to make that change, we have to look sexy. It has to be a sexy solution. And getting this part right, this first part of building a transformational product and service is really a huge piece of that. Clients and customers get what they want, can feel better about their purchase, and their community is enriched by their decisions as well. And that is a win-win-win-win, and that feels good all around. And that's the type of design that we need to make when we're thinking of the product or service that we're building as a regenerative enterprise, and who is purchasing that and who's engaging with it, right? We can't just hit the early adopters. And yes, we need to focus on the early adopters first and get those easy wins. But it has to be a product or service that can stand the test of time, creating value. And it starts in that area. So the second, I'm not going to really beat that into the ground any more than that. Let's move on to this second piece here of building an impact, creating impact, or scaling our impact, I should say. The 5 pieces that I'm talking about. The second piece is the authentic story, right? In order for us to scale our impact as a regenerative enterprise builders, we're going to have and become really good storytellers. We're going to have a good story, and we're going to have to be good at telling it. In order to grow, your story has to show how you authentically create the transformation through that product and service, right? It's one thing to have a transformational product and service. It's an entirely other thing to be able to sell and be able to get that out in the world. And it comes through having a very authentic and meaningful and impactful story, right? In order to tell that story, you need to know the characters of the story. So that's kind of the first part. We can start getting into the understanding of what storytelling is, but there's always going to be 2 main characters in a transformational story. We call this a hero's journey story. If you've been on the podcast or have listened to a few podcasts on storytelling, especially for our businesses, we're telling a hero's journey story, similar to, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. Frodo and Gandalf are 2 of the main characters. In fact, probably the most important characters is Frodo and Gandalf, right? And then in Star Wars, you have Luke Skywalker and you have Obi-Wan. 2 very important characters that if you didn't have those characters, you wouldn't have the story. You wouldn't have this transformation arc that kind of goes through it. And what are those characters? They are the hero, Luke Skywalker, and the guide, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And you have to really understand those characters in order to tell a transformational story so well. You have to understand them so well that you can consistently represent who that hero is, which, by the way, is your ideal client or customer. And you can articulate yourself, represent yourself, because you are the guide to their transformation. You're Obi-Wan, they're Luke Skywalker. You can consistently present and represent the hero and the guide in such a way that you build this transformational experience. You want to do this across every channel and every medium you're involved in. You can do that. You can scale your impact to the levels that you want them to be. In order to consistently tell that story, you have to build the marketing systems around it as well, right? And that will allow you to maintain and improve the way you share your message. It's one thing now to have a story, have a message, be able to clearly articulate that, but to do that over time, over and over again across lots of mediums and lots of channels, that will get you in front of people and get you the kind of brand loyalty and brand impact. It's doing that through having marketing systems that are intentional and not just throwing stuff up against the wall and seeing what sticks, right? When you have a regenerative enterprise who has scaled an authentic narrative, this again makes degrowth look extremely sexy to the masses. It doesn't really start out that way. It like your story has to build up over time and people have to get involved in it, right? But people will have to see in their minds first that type of transformation, and those that can envision that story are your early adopters, right? But that because you've built a narrative that's transformational and it really will touch them emotionally because they want to see that transformation. That type of energy, that emotion, it carries from one person to another. And then you start to see everybody and their grandma picking up this narrative and saying, yes, I want this. This looks good. This makes me feel good. Right. And that's why you see things like Apple, right? Where everybody and their grandma is buying an Apple computer or Apple phone because they really focused in on this. And I'm not saying Apple's a regenerative business or has a regenerative business model by any means. And I'm not saying that I'm an Apple fan by any means. I'm not. But they've done something really good in their marketing that has allowed for this narrative that they put forth to help them to scale their business. I'm not saying that they even have like a worthy impact on the world. But they are, if we want to scale our impact, we also have to learn how to do this for our own business. And if everybody and their grandma is purchasing an Apple, what are some of the things that they're doing right? Well, the narrative they've gotten right, and the characters of that narrative they've gotten right. And it's because they do it in such a way where that emotional transformation that person who purchased an Apple phone or an Apple computer, the narrative was for the creative, right? You are the change makers. These, you probably have heard that ad when they released, I forget what Apple computer, right? The iMac or whatever. They got people really excited about the type of person that you become when you purchase this product and you become this creative type, right? That's an innovator or someone that thinks outside the box and so forth and so on. They painted this narrative of that. And because people were so attached to that narrative when they purchased, they had this transformation with the product and service that was emotional. And that emotion carried on to the people around them. Of course, it carried on to grandma. Grandma just wanted to have the same feeling that her grandson had when he purchased this new computer that looks hip and cool and new, right? And so even though they didn't have believe in the same narrative, they still purchased for the same emotional transformational reasons, right? And that can happen the same way for your product or service that is adding value and is transformative and is adding to the regenerative economy, this new regenerative economy that we're building towards. This comes from the feelings that you create within that transformative narrative. And if you want it to be, if you want to scale, that is a huge piece to scaling our impact as regenerative enterprise builders. Someone makes some type of changes in their behavior, makes them feel good about it. And if you are that person that's created the product or service that's doing that, you can really create great impact. Again, now this is I've just explained only 2 of the 5 parts that we're talking about here when it comes to scaling our impact. The transformational product or service, right? And the authentic narrative. These 2 are so tied together that they're almost one and the same, right? We really can't have an authentic narrative that's creating transformation without a transformative product or service. And we can't have a transformational product or service if we don't understand who we're telling the narrative to and why we're telling it and who we are as people in that story, as the brand, as the business, as the people within that brand and business, right? It's all interconnected. Marketing systems is this third piece that we're going to talk about, unpack here, to creating impact. If we can build our marketing systems that build greater understanding around regenerative systems, regenerative economies, around doing good for the people, planet, and future, well, okay. We can build greater understanding through our marketing systems rather than what is out there a lot of times is these exploitative and very manipulative marketing, then we can scale our impact to where we want it to go. This is really the next piece, right? If we can have the transformational product, an authentic narrative that helps us to share that transformation, then we need to be able to do that consistently over and over again to reach the impact that we want. And it's through our marketing systems that we do so. So I'm not going to go into great detail on how to build out your marketing system in this episode. That's not really the conversation that we're involved in here. But we do talk about it in other episodes, like episode 121, where we talk about a regeneratively designed way of doing marketing, right? So if you want to go visit that episode, highly suggest it. It's another one like this where I'm just having a conversation with you and it's very one-sided because I'm just talking to you. But I also on that episode would love your feedback and thoughts and conversation around. So please give that a listen. What I do want to explore here and at least give you a baseline understanding of is that within marketing systems, it's going to exist whether or not you are actively intentionally building out your marketing systems, right? There are systems at play that you're going to have to operate in regardless of whether or not you're being intentional with it. They're inherent to what it is to be in business and have a good or service that you're selling. And those three main systems that marketing is made up of are strategy, the system that designs the story and narrative that you're telling; content, a system that tells the story, like what it really is the story because you're producing the content, whether it's me on this podcast or telling you and talking to you about stuff. This is content, right? Or you're writing it as a blog, or you're putting it in an advertisement or whatever it is, right? That content is the system that tells the story. The strategy behind that beforehand is the system that is designing, right? The narrative. And finally, third is your distribution, the system that delivers the story. So when it comes to, for example, this podcast, right? What is delivering this? What's the system that's delivering this? Well, we have the platforms that are Spotify, iTunes, right? And they're all being distributed out to you, and you're listening on those platforms. But there's ways that those platforms are optimized and marketed and built upon, and those systems have to be in place in order for you to scale your message and to scale your impact. So that's the three systems again. There's strategy, the system that designs the story; content, the system that tells the story; and distribution, the system that delivers the story. And again, we go over this more in episode 121, where we're talking about regenerative design marketing systems. But I want you to have that baseline, that there are these three systems that we're working with. They are all related to story, but they're the ways that we share our message and get our message out there and do it in a way that is strategic, in a way that creates the right type of content, and a way that gets the content to the right channels and in the right places, right? If you don't have these systems in place, you start throwing things up against the wall and seeing what sticks. And then you start to recognize that eventually, hopefully, you learn from what's sticking up there, and you see that there's systems at play, and you start using those. But if that's your strategy, is just throwing stuff up against the wall and seeing what sticks, it's a very data-driven model, and it works for some businesses as well, where they're just A/B testing and they're just doing this to see what sticks. But it becomes a very manipulative way of doing marketing. And we talk about this in episode 121, so I'm not going to go into great detail. But if you're going to make it easy for you to create impact in your business, and you're trying to scale impact, you don't want to just throw stuff up against the wall and be manipulative by finding what works and only doing things that is clickbait and all of that type of marketing, right? You want to be building narrative that is authentic and creating transformations. So more regenerative businesses with marketing systems that are designed to build greater understanding rather than just exploitation makes the thought of degrowth, again, look very sexy, because it makes the movement look like it has its crap put together, and people want to deal with people that have their crap put together, right? That look like they know what they're doing and are doing it using in a very intentional way, right? And they don't want to deal with all of these many shady salespeople and marketers that are out there. So if we can tell an authentic story, and we're not using these very shady and manipulative ways of throwing stuff up the wall, seeing what sticks, and then playing the numbers game and getting an understanding of what the numbers can do for us to manipulate how people are responding to the messages that we're creating, then we can build a really good narrative that is based upon the people that are trying to seek for a certain type of transformation, have that emotional transformation, and have a system that helps them to engage with that consistently over time. Then you have a narrative that's not the shady salesperson or marketer, and it looks like it has its stuff together. Because really what I see is two extremes out there, and it's those two that I mentioned. There's the out of touch idealist in this realm of regenerative enterprises that has no clue and can't relate to normal people, because they either live in their own little bubble and can't get beyond their own frame of thought to see how other people are living out there, and that they're just trying to live decent lives, right? And so they blame, they get frustrated about other people that aren't living the same type of idealistic life that they are, and they're out of touch and they can't relate, right? And that's one extreme that's found in our regenerative movement, right? And then there's the other side, the other extreme that we see all too often, and there's probably more of this than the other, is that we have the pushy salesperson that is out there because they're loud everywhere, and they're selling their wares, and they're the pushy marketers as well, creating campaigns that are manipulative, trying to get you to do something. So those two extremes, we're trying to move away from, right? You have to actually be in the market with your crap together, understanding who you're talking to, and not pushing your ideals on them, but actually helping them to seek for a valuable transformation that they can relate to, while also not being the pushy salesman or manipulative marketer that is just trying to get your sell, just trying to get the product out the door, or you under contract, right? So that is the third piece, is getting your marketing systems in place. You have to get that done in order to create the impact that you want, or scale your impact. Because again, yeah, you can create great impact without really scaling your marketing systems. You're just going to stay very, very small, very hyper local, or very hyper niche, and you can have a decent livelihood just on referrals and those, creating a transformation with each individual. But if you really truly want to scale your impact to a big level, you can also you're going to need strong marketing systems to be able to do that. Now, fourth, let's talk about a marketing team, right? You got your marketing systems in place, and at some point, you can't do it alone. You definitely can't. You can't even do it with one other person or two other people. You have to start to build a team out, a marketing team. And I call this a growth marketing team, largely because I was before this in my other life, and it's still my life, right? I'm still engaged in this work. I am a marketer and a salesman, and my career has been that as well. I had a branding agency, and we focused on building marketing systems and marketing teams for the high growth businesses. A lot of those in the tech industry, but yeah, any business that was looking for high growth. I'm not proud of it. We were out there trying to build out their systems and show ways that their marketing team wasn't actually in line with those systems, so that they in order for them to scale. And I don't want to see those extractive and exploitative businesses that maybe I know that I was working before, keep on using those same systems to grow and scale. But I do want to see you scale your regenerative enterprise. And a big way to be able to do that is by building out your marketing team around the sound marketing systems that we talked about. So you're going to be building a strategic team, right? And you're going to be building a content team, and you're going to be building a distribution team, a team that a strategy team that is going to help make sure that the storytelling side of things gets put into place, that you can design a story and narrative that is impactful and transformational. And you're going to be building a content team that can actually figure out how to tell your story through different mediums and through different mediums, right? Podcasts, video, all sorts of different types, copy, text, whatever it is, books, all sorts of different mediums in which you can tell your story. But you have to have a content team to be able to do that. And so we'll talk about that right now in just a moment. But there's the third team as well, your distribution team, and really what they're working on is making sure that your message gets out there, and they're doing that in several different ways, depending on the right mix for you as far as what channels you feel comfortable in and working on, and the right channels that are going to scale your business at this to the size that you need to, or in the time frame that you need to, because there's also that piece of it as well. So let's talk about this. The strategy team really consists of your marketing leaders a lot of times, and your CEO. You have to have the CEO involved in marketing regardless. They can't be detached from it, because it's a huge part of the way that your business operates. So the visionary of the business, whatever it is, if they're called the CEO, has to be engaged with the strategic team of your marketing, and helping you to build out that system within your marketing, the strategic system. So the CEO, the visionary, collaborates with the CMO, which is the one that holds the strategy, right, for telling your story. They are the strategy leader, the CMO, and they will work with both the creative director and the distribution director to create content and implement the strategy, the story into the content you produce and into the channels, right? And so you have a creative director that is really in charge of all the creative people, which is a hard thing to do if you think about it. Working with a bunch of creatives is a difficult thing, but it's a fun one. That's one thing I really enjoy is the creative side of marketing. But it takes a really good creative director that can work with creative types and build narrative that is aligned with the strategy and not just making pretty stuff, right? That really moves the vision forward of the CEO, right? And then the distribution person that has to work with everybody is the distribution director. Really is the channel leader. They know how to get that message out there, whether it's through paid ads, organic social or organic media or shared media or different types of media forms. They understand how to get those out there in the right channels, right? So that is your strategic team. It's the leaders in your marketing. And then you have your content team. So they are the really technical people for content. They're creatives, right? So your creative director's on that team, but he's essentially the leader. So he's more thinking strategically of how we get this content built and tell the story through it. So underneath or in that team, right, we have people like your graphics designer and copywriter are probably some of the two most important creatives that you have. Someone that can visually help you to stand out and share the message visually, because a lot of storytelling is not just about the words of the story, but it's excuse me, dry throat. It's about having the visual side of the story told through color and now infographics and imagery that really conveys what is happening in these narratives, right? So it's all the unwritten things. And then your copywriter, who's actually really taking the time to understand and creatively tell the story through copy. And that copywriter often will be writing things for multiple channels. So they could be writing things for video, writing the scripts for video, writing the scripts for ad copy, for sales copy, for salespeople, right? And really starting to incorporate the story into the mediums that are being used. Now your distribution team, they are also technical folks, but their main focus is on distribution. So their technical skills are engaged in that area. So you have a few big pieces in this area is you have your distribution director, again, which is a part of the strategy team, but is the leader of the distribution team and helps to incorporate the strategy into the distribution technical aspects of distribution. And so you see a lot of the distribution side of things works or the technical side of things works with the channel that you are engaged in. If you are in paid ads, like paid social, and you're doing Facebook ads or something, which a lot of people in the regenerative realm are against, and I see that, but there's also a need for it if you're trying to scale. It's almost like the need for a car, right? You're going to need a car to get around. It's just kind of the way the world works in a lot of our modern systems. Well, ad buying or paid ads is kind of a necessity if you want to scale at a certain rate or need to scale at a certain rate to get market penetration or whatever, right? If you're needing to go fast and speed is a necessity, paid ads and having a technical ad buyer is needed for your distribution team. And then on some of the other side of things, it's about community management, and it's about press release and public relations and those types of pieces. And so you'll have a technical person that is in charge of your PR and community management. Yeah. So if you have this technical person that's involved in the PR and community management, that they really belong in the distribution team and getting your message out there through the networking and channel building that way, right? Earned media, where you were to do something great out in the world, and you want that to be known, and so you get that information out through press releases, or someone picks you up in on a blog post, or a blogger or an influencer picks you up. That's all earned media stuff, and it really does take someone that's engaged in outreach and getting relationship building of those pieces, and that's the kind of technical work that happens within the distribution team, is within this kind of PR and community manager, and then there's within this distribution team as well. We want to a lot of distribution is where the data of whether or not our story is landing or not is working. So we have roles and technical pieces within this team that helps you to one, automize and optimize your work, and also really truly understand and analyze the message and bring that back and to the content team and to the strategic team to create better storytelling, to be more authentic, to reach people in a certain way that's beneficial to your audience. And the distribution team is a huge factor in that place. So this is a really strong growth marketing team, and I'm actually giving you some really insider thoughts on and strategic ways to build out a really effective growth marketing team for your impact business. And this comes from a lot of years of seeing businesses lack some of these pieces, and then also seeing businesses take on and grow teams in a way that really does focus in on the strategic systems, the content systems and distribution systems of your marketing to really scale their growth, and in this case, scale our impact in building regenerative solutions and bringing them to the forefront. So that is, to me, maybe I'm just kind of a nerd, but I also think this is another area where this makes degrowth look sexy, because if we can get marketing teams that are really set up to get our message out there of regenerative transformation, boy, does it really compete with some of those other narratives out there that are either greenwashing and not really doing a good job of sharing the narrative of what a regenerative economy can look like, or they're completely just extractive and exploitative and ruining our ability to create the change that we want to see because of the extraction that's happening, the exploitation that's happening involved in those systems. So I think if we can get our growth marketing teams or more businesses that can reach that type of scale, I'm not saying every business has to reach this scale or should reach this scale with a strong marketing team, but there are many out there that very well need to, in order for us to see the impact that we want. And this is a strong growth marketing team that will help us to get there. So yeah, I think if we want to see degrowth in extractive and exploitative systems, building your and create greater impact in your regenerative enterprise, building your marketing team is a growth marketing team is critical to that. Many people listening won't like what I'm saying at this point, right? In this conversation, because they're probably looking at this in a from my perspective, from the perspective of that doesn't look like degrowth. That looks like a business that's really trying to scale efforts, right? Well, I'm taking this from those high growth situations. That's where I came from in my marketing career. But it doesn't mean that it's not needed and applicable to what we're doing in our own movement towards degrowth of these extractive and exploitative systems. I know I probably have said that like 50 times now, but it's a part of our human nature to see things grow. And in fact, it's probably one of our most unique contributions to our planet if it's used in the right way. We want to see things grow. We want to see things thrive and look really changed. We want to see transformation, right? And that part of our human nature can be used to do great good. It just has to be in the right way. We even want to see economic growth. Let's be honest. We want everyone to have fulfilling jobs, a way to provide for their households and a growing community. And we want to see ecosystems to thrive and to grow, forests, grasslands. I think everybody really wants to see this. It's part of nature. It's beauty. We go out on vacation to see these types of things. We don't want to see our watersheds depleted and polluted. We don't want to see marine life suffering when we go visit the beaches, and we don't want to see plastic on them. It's unattractive, and instead we want to see those ecosystems grow and thrive, and all of our systems to be growing and thriving. And that's across the board. That's something I think we can all relate on, whether or not we have political stances or anything else that says otherwise, right? We want future generations to continue to thrive and grow. We don't want to see a degrowth of civilization in the sense where we see poverty, people starving, people entire civilizations collapsing. It's horrible to see. We don't want to see that, right? We want to see them grow and thrive and be sustainable and regenerative. The only thing we don't want to see is extraction of nature and the manipulation of people and their ways of life, and trying to manipulate and exploit people. And we don't want to see our future generations take on the mantle of trying to save a crumbling world. We really don't want to see those things. And that's what I think the degrowth movement is about. When we're talking about degrowth of economy, we're talking about making the degrowth of these very extractive and exploitative systems unpopular and not sexy. And what we were trying to make look sexy is the growth of the things that we really truly want to see that excite us and we want to see more of. So I really do want to finally end on some pieces here that I think will help you as a regenerative enterprise builder to start working on these pieces. If you want to scale your impact, we really do have to work together. And this is kind of the final piece that I want to have a discussion about. And there has to be an equal opposition in our current economy to the few extractive and exploitative behemoths, right? There's really a very small percentage of businesses out there that are creating this huge exploitative and extractive model and engine that we all have to kind of live with, right? But there's many businesses that can come together and learn and grow together that are really trying to build towards a better future together. And because we're small, it's going to take more time and effort to collaborate and work together to compete or to help transition from the extractive model and narrative to the regenerative model and narrative, right? It's going to take a lot to take down these big and mighty behemoths, and even throw in their weight and make changes just because they're so big, right? As many small enterprises woven together, we can reach places. This is what makes it unique is we're a little bit more agile in that aspect that we can reach places that none of the bigger behemoths can, because we're grassroots, right? We start showing up in the market instead of shying away, and we do this in a very connected and collaborative way. Other organizations that are smaller and decentralized can move narrative forward together, and we can promote each other's works. So we got to tie our efforts together into the bigger transformative narratives that we have to match the bigger transformative narratives that help to separate the people from the problem, because we really can't isolate people and say that and attach them to the problem and say they're the problem. They need to stop doing this and point fingers at their chests and really try to poke holes into who they are as people. That's not going to work. It's just only going to isolate and separate us from others. And instead we want to bring people together, right? And so we have to be involved in narratives that help us to do that, to separate the people from the problem. Bigger transformative narratives that focus on the interests and desires people have to create regenerative change rather than the positions that people are taking, right? Positions on, oh, yes, we should what's a position that we could take in regenerative ag? There's the position of no one should be using chemicals. Chemicals are bad. I'm gonna put my foot in the ground, and that's, everybody that's taking using chemicals is horrible people, and da 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 da. It's really placing people as the problem, for one thing, but it's making it really difficult to really focus on the interests that those people have. What are they doing that for? They're doing it because they want to grow food for people and family, and they want to do it so that there's security and less hunger problems and poverty problems, or there's many reasons. Well, is there other ways that we can focus on the interests that they have that are aligned with the interests that we have? Because we have those similar interests of wanting to be able to feed people, wanting to be able to make sure people are healthy and aware and of what they're eating and so forth, right? And so if we can focus less on the position and more on our interests and desires and build narrative around that, that's great. And we can come together on that collaboratively. That brings the narrative much, much closer to a regenerative one, and therefore us closer to living in a regenerative economy and creating the impact that we want. Finally, if we can build towards bigger narratives together that open communities and cultures up to exploring solutions that they wouldn't normally have thought of, right? So if we want people to start having these conversations, and we need to be able to help them to or help each other, all of us, to brainstorm. And we don't have all the solutions as regenerative business builders or people in the regenerative movement, nor should we, right? And we have to come to the table to open up our minds and the minds of others together to explore new solutions, and the bigger narratives that we get in front of that are interest and desire based rather than position based, and are separating people from the problem, are going to actually be narratives that create the impact that we want. So the only way to change culture is through these grassroots movements that are nimble and able to take on some of these systemic challenges that we have. And one of the main reasons for this is because it's sexy to see lots of different individuals working towards a common goal, right? Going back to that let's make degrowth sexy, right? Well, when we see a lot of people getting it involved in a narrative and understanding a certain way of doing things. A lot of people working together on a grassroots work that are from very diverse and different backgrounds. That looks good. People want to be able to collaborate, work together, and combined efforts with others that are different from them, right? It makes us feel good to be able to work with our neighbor that doesn't have the same views and maybe not even the same belief structure, but can still get behind making certain types of changes that benefit the people, planet, and future, right? People want to see that, they really do. And so it opens up more doors for you if you can collaborate with your other regenerative enterprise builders to build narratives that are collectively a part of these collective narratives, these bigger transformative narratives that are interest and desire based, right? Combine your efforts with others. More doors will open for you to scale your individual and collective impact. And yes, it's a huge piece. So let's do a recap at this point. I know this is a longer conversation today, but I had to get this out. I had to. It's been a long time in the making, this episode and the thoughts in it, for me just to say this to you and to talk to you about being able to scale our impact as regenerative enterprise builders. So the recap of the 5 things we can do to scale our impact and make the degrowth of extractive and exploitative systems sexy. First, have a transformational product or service that brings value to people, planet, and future. Second, have an authentic story that engages with communities. Third, build marketing systems that don't just exploit others, but help us to have greater understanding, help others to have greater understanding of regenerative services and products. And fourth, have a strong marketing team. Or no, did I get that right? Yeah, I did. That's number 4. Have a strong marketing team that helps you to scale effectively to the size that is going to create the greatest amount of impact. And finally, 5th, let's collaborate together as regenerative business builders and build and work on creating collaborative narratives that bring people together and change culture and help us to create the impact that we want. All right, so those are the 5 for helping us to scale our impact. I want to know, this is the 5 according to Josh, right? I want to know in the comments of wherever you're picking this up or wherever you're listening to this podcast episode, let's start conversations around it. You can become a part of the Seeds of Dow community by going to our website, filling out the form for the community, and engaging with us there and having the conversation there. You can engage with us on social. You can even reach out to me by email at joshua@seedsofdow.com, especially if you want to be on the podcast and you have a regenerative enterprise yourself that's in this area of like scaling for regenerative business growth, right? Let's do this. Let's do this together. Let's have a conversation together as well. It really does start there. So I'm going to call you to action on some things because I think there's some resources that we have that can help you in scaling your impact. And we hope there are resources available to you. And that's one of the main reasons why we exist, is to provide education and resources for regenerative entrepreneurs. So make sure you keep on listening to this podcast. I'm going to call you to action on that. Listen to the podcast. Give us a rating, review. That helps us out tremendously to get this message out there. And like us on your social, like the podcast on your social channels and so forth, and share the episode itself if you find it interesting. So keep on listening. Join us for an event. We do a lot of events with Seeds of Dow. Some of those are our monthly think tanks where we come together as regenerative entrepreneurs We call them the Regenpreneur think tanks, and we work through challenges of building regenerative enterprises together. So join us for an event. That's one way. That's one of the events you can join us for, is the think tanks. Another event are our master classes, where we have an entrepreneur who has become a master at some form in building their regenerative business, share what they've become a master about with you, and teach and educate and have discussions around it. And so that's our master classes. And you can come attend those live, or we have those recorded on our as a free resource to you on our what is it called? The Regen Ben Network, resources, something like that. There's some free resources if you get involved in the community. That's one of them, is our masterclass recordings. You can join us there. And then we also have other events that come up that are either sponsored or a part of Seeds of Down itself. One of those is Regeneration Pollination, where the regenerative movement comes and networks together, gets to know each other. We talk on different topics as like an after hours, but it's a one-on-one, get to know someone in like a speed dating format. You can join us for that type of event as well. And we help to sponsor those regeneration pollination events. Help yourself to the education materials on our website. Some of them are paid. A lot of them are free as well. We do have a new course out there for those that are trying to scale their business through their marketing and messaging efforts. And so that is called StorySeed, the marketing and message course for StorySeed for Seeds of Dow. So go ahead. It's beta mode, so it's actually got a really good price for beta, $200. It's actually going to get moved up to $200 for lifetime purchase, and then it's going to get moved up to $750 roughly once we kind of get through our beta version of it, and there's more resources. But in the meantime, there is a really good sweet spot where we have office hours for StorySeed. There's not a lot of people on office hours, so you almost get like group consultation as well to help you build out your marketing and messaging systems for your business. A lot of what we talked about today, if you're really wanting help in those areas to create greater impact through your business, we can definitely, StorySeed's a great course for that. And of course, come partner with us. We're looking for many more educational partners so we can help teach regenerative entrepreneurs and principles of regenerative entrepreneurship to the masses. So if you're wanting to partner with us that way, you can also be on the podcast and partner just to share your story there. And we're looking for other partners that we can host retreats with and do other really collaborative work. So if you have any thoughts on ways that you can collaborate with us, please reach out. Again, my email is joshua@seedsofdow.com. My wife's email is emily@seedsofdow.com. You can reach both of us through email, and you can also reach us on the community just by sending us a direct message within the community. All right. Thanks again for listening to this very long podcast. It's almost an hour and a half. So if you've stayed to the end, thank you so much. We are coming to you weekly, sometimes twice a week on the podcast. So stay tuned for another episode weekly. Bye for now, and keep on growing. Keep on growing your mind. Keep on growing your heart. Of course, keep on growing the garden. But really, we want to see you to grow your regenerative enterprise. Bye for now.